Hello and welcome to ANC Decides, the show that gives you up-to-the-minute news and commentary building up to the ANC's elective conference. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabalani. Now, firstly, let's take a look at ANC elective conference headlines. Coming up first, a bid to nullify the Eastern Cape ANC's elective conference struck off the roll. Judge, however, rules that the papers filed for the case could be used for a possible review of the conference. ANC top leadership is in KZN. Decision expected on whether the party should go ahead with an appeal against the High Court ruling that declared the KwaZulu-Natal's 2015 provincial conference unlawful. The Free State PEC reaches a conclusion on the legal challenge to legitimacy of the provincial structure. This after the NEC put a moratorium on provincial conferences after September the 30th. Now, the legal bid to nullify the Eastern Cape's ANC conference has been dismissed, but the party's problems seem to be far from over.
The court challenge to the Eastern Cape ANC structure paints a picture of an organization at war with itself. The dispute is unlikely to end with the dismissal of the opposing faction's nullification bid.
Counsel for the respondents contended that this lackadaisical approach was fatal to the application on the issue of urgency. I am inclined to agree. As it turned out, after I issued the directive, the business of the conference continued through the night and had, according to the brief answering affidavit of Mr. Maboyane, concluded by the time the matter was argued before me. Not unexpectedly, counsel for the respondents submitted that apart from the short notice and the drastic abridgment of the rules of court, this rendered the interim relief sought by the applicants entirely academic.
The judge's basis for the dismissal of the Eastern Cape application leaves room for further legal challenge in the near future. And this is not a battle the reigning faction is prepared to take lying down.
The interdict was about interdicting the conference first so that the conference doesn't sit. Now that they've missed that one, they are bringing that one of trying to nullify the conference. So surely we are expecting them to move other papers for the kind of review and nullification of the conference, which will always be ready, and our lawyers are on the guard on that one.
The bruising legal battle is not unique to the Eastern Cape. More provincial ANC legal disputes are in the offing, which leaves the fate of the ANC's December National Conference hanging in the balance.
I was supposed to be with the other officials in KZN, where the other officials are meeting with the Provincial Executive Committee. We are going to make sure that we work together with all of you to bind the organization together so that we avoid what mistakes we made in KZN. We took too long to address the problems and the challenges zase KZN.
The ANC top brass is working around the clock to put out fires sparked by fierce competition. Meanwhile, the jury is out on whether the courts can provide lasting solutions to internal party problems. Bureau Report, ANN7.
Now, the top six of the ANC is holding a meeting with KZN leaders to resolve the impasse following that Peter Maritzburg ruling on the PC's legitimacy. Now, joining us from Durban is Noluthando Nkosi. Now, Noluthando, welcome to you and a very good afternoon. We understand that today they're having the meeting, but it's essentially a closed session. But what do we know perhaps of some of the issues on the agenda?
Good evening, Nomfunda, and good evening to the viewers at home. We are currently standing outside the meeting venue, the Coastlands Hotel, just off Durban South Beach in Durban. The meeting started this morning at 11, or rather it resumed at 11 this morning, as we do understand that they had been meeting yesterday the entire day as well. It is now 6:30. It is now it's now just after 5, and several of our colleagues from other media houses have just left because we have not been kept up to date. We've been told that we'll be invited for a briefing once they have wrapped everything up, but to date, the meeting is still underway, Nomfundo.
But trusting that our journalists are very resourceful, is there anything that we know, even just perhaps have you caught sight of any of the top six that are supposedly in there?
No, we haven't been told anything. In fact, as we were busy setting up to do this live, a security personnel approached us and asked us if we had permission to actually be shooting here. Luckily enough, we're not inside the venue, we're outside. Everything has been kept very undercover. We know nothing. We don't know what's on the agenda. We have been told absolutely nothing, except for the fact that the NEC will communicate with the media and with South Africa at large once they have reached a decision.
And then beyond this, do we know when exactly we'll be having that briefing?
Could you just repeat that for me, Namfundo?
I'm saying, do we perhaps have the exact time or even the day when they will be briefing the media? Will it be perhaps tomorrow?
We are certainly hoping for tomorrow. We do understand that yesterday they met with the PEC and today they met with what has been bugged as the rebels. So they are currently meeting with the rebels. We are hoping they'll wrap up yesterday and today, and then hopefully by the latest tomorrow evening we will get feedback on what the NEC, what decision they have reached.
No, thank you very much, Noluthando, for that. We'll certainly keep in touch with you as the days progress while the top six is still there, locked in meetings. Now, that is our reporter, Noluthando, who's out in Durban today. We know that the top six of the ANC top brass is meeting, stuck in deliberations. It is a closed session discussing the issues that continue to plague the KZN, particularly the PEC and that grouping that won that Peter Maritzburg ruling. We're now joined today, we're going to cross to Giovanni, who's out in Free State. There's been a lot happening in Free State, particularly them also being faced with possible legal action. So we're going to be crossing to our reporter, Giovanni Majani, who's out in the Free State. It seems we don't have our reporter as yet. We'll actually cross to our guests in studio. We're joined today by political analyst Professor Sipho Siepe. Professor, welcome to you.
Thank you for inviting me.
No, it's always a pleasure. Now, first things first, we can possibly start with the happenings of this week in the Eastern Cape. It was chaotic, chaos of unimaginable proportions. Some say it's democracy at work, what we saw after that, where a grouping went to court seeking to interdict that particular conference. Or some saying it's indicative of a bigger problem within the party. What is your take on all the events that took place?
Well, first of all, the reason why we have democracy and democratic process is to avoid chaos. So what you saw in Eastern Cape cannot be described as democracy in action. But what it does show is the challenges that the organization faces. And part of those challenges, unfortunately, they go as far back as Polokwane. The ANC has allowed a certain level of ill discipline to take place and to mushroom within its own structures. We had the senior people in the ANC who never accepted the outcome of Polokwane. And for the last 10 years, their only contribution in the ANC has been to create a dissonance and to try to undermine the leadership that was elected. So that level of tolerance manifests itself in what we see. And Gwede Mantashe also talks about the whirlwind of factionalism, which has happened since then. You saw groupings leaving the ANC, some forming what you call groups like 102 or 101 consent, some coming with some saying they want to have a consultative conference. And also you have had two groupings that left the ANC since then, the EFF that was booted out or that was formed after Malema was booted out. You saw COPE that left. So since 2007, the ANC has never been a happy space.
So what do we say of these internal processes? Does it talk of there being a lack or whatever processes they have at this point? They seem to be struggling somehow to contain their issues and keep them internal if we're seeing a lot of people going to court.
I think probably the challenge that was facing the leadership from 2007 was that of tolerance. But you see, you can have tolerance, but you must also have discipline. So in the absence of disciplining some of the senior members of the ANC, you end up with this situation. I mean, you've had very senior people who joined forces with groupings that are historically anti-ANC, and the leadership has been quiet about that. You've had leaders of the ANC that are trying to campaign, spending most of their time attacking the ANC and attacking the leadership that they are part of. And the organization has been tolerant of that. And when you have leadership like that, that is not leadership. It is what Gwede Montashe described as people suffering from crass opportunism and vanguardism. And I don't think what we see in the Eastern Cape simply came overnight. It came because it was tolerated overnight. Even the handling of it this weekend, even by the Deputy President, leaves much to be desired.
Talk us through that, because some have been talking about the presence of national leadership there. We had Cyril Ramaphosa, he addressed them. He seemed to be talking of unity. We also had Lindiwe Zulu, some commending her and saying that she remained very neutral in that position. What was your take of their presence there?
Yeah, I think one could say she did remain neutral with the intention of making sure that the stability and the conference continues, and even her own pronouncement. But when you have a conference where half of the people are walk out, and you also have chairs being thrown like we saw, as the Deputy President himself called it, a festival of chairs, then you can't go there as a Deputy President and then almost endorse the outcome and say, you guys who have won must reach out. Effectively, you are saying, despite what we've seen, I'm endorsing this. And the notion that people could run to the courts does not resolve the issue. What we had there, you should have had the Deputy President who should have called the top six, saying this is the reality, that almost half of the members of the ANC have walked out. And you can't have delegates that are 1,700 or even 800. Then you only have about 900 remaining.
But it brings us to the court ruling, Professor, where it said that they corrected. That in essence today why it was struck off is because, firstly, the application was brought to perhaps interdict the conference. It had concluded. So the reasoning behind coming to apply for that ceased to exist. But beyond that, then Lindiwe Zulu went on to say they had corrected. So they counted. They had more than the number they could continue. What is your take on that?
No, you see, you can correct. But when you correct does not mean that the meeting was properly handled. You could have people hurt in the process, and some people were hurt. You could have people being shot, and there were stun grenades. You could have people fighting, and you can't say on the basis of that people corrected, the outcome must be acceptable. And then our concept of engagement has reached the lowest of the low.
So you're saying that technically they met the standards, but they needed to think politically that we've got a crisis on our hands. People are hurt, they've left, they would have loved to vote.
Exactly. So you don't know what the outcome would have been had other people not left. The current group may still have won, but you could also have found a form that unites, where people who belong to the other group might also be in the top six, because what you have, people will be saying, but yes, I belong to this faction, but I also like this other person. In the same way that you found some people being voted by some of the members of the faction that remained. But we can't allow a situation where we are minimalist about democracy. But part of it is because we have tolerated disorder and ill discipline, and I must say, among the very senior members of the ANC. And in as much as the Deputy President was saying, you must go and talk to them, I think he was actually endorsing the outcome. You don't endorse it on the basis of that you correct. You endorse it on the basis of have the comrades found each other, because ultimately the lasting solution is not the court process, it's not technicalities, it is the hearts and minds of members of the ANC. And as I indicated, that you saw some members of the ANC, very senior, those who have not recovered from the political defeat in Polokwane, and have since spent every year, every meeting, almost questioning the leadership. So that is not how you solve political issues. But also you must have the courage, in as much as we've seen this leadership being tolerant. What it lacked is the courage to discipline those members who showed a serious element of ill discipline.
Then talk to me about this assertion of political problems needing to somehow be resolved via political solutions or political means. Is that honestly the only way to go, or there comes a time where you might need to head to the courts?
Well, I think even before you deal with the courts, you must also come to the reality that some people who are in the bus should not be in the bus. The biggest crisis in the ANC is its inability to acknowledge and appreciate that they may have walked the path together, but there comes a time when people part ways. In the same way that when you have a marriage that is broken down irretrievably, people say part ways. You may have been on the journey, but I think we've reached a stage where members of the ANC, some of them have been co-opted by the big monies, and when you see them even supported by forces that are historically hostile to the ANC, forces that are anti-black. When you have a movement, organizations like COSATU, participating in marches against the president of the ANC and supported by big business that spends on a daily basis where it exploits workers, then you know that something is wrong. So the sooner the ANC leadership, at least those who are committed to the liberation of black people in general and Africans in particular, needs to say to the others, sorry guys, I don't think we should be in the same bus. And this is why some of us have proposed, and I think Nkosazana Zuma has also suggested that you must let certain people go. There are people who, when they speak, even when they talk about corruption, those people will never even mention the word Rupert. They will never mention the word like APSA. They will never mention words like the collusion that we had actually seen, but that the banks have accepted that they were involved in some currency fixing. They have accepted the people in the bread cartel have accepted and said they were guilty. The people in construction have accepted, but you'll find some of the leaders who are vocal about the corruption will never mention those names. So you know that you have a problem. So the ANC needs to be courageous to say, we have walked this path up to now. We found each other, but we no longer find each other. So the issue is, if you have an organization that still belabors this notion of saying everybody can be in the same room, same tent, it's misleading itself. It's actually delusional.
Okay, but then beyond this, the dynamics in KZN. We've just spoken now to our reporter. There's not much coming out of there, but we do know that the top brass is there locked in meetings and they're discussing some sort of a political solution. Yes, they have filed leave to appeal that ruling from Peter Maritzburg. But beyond this, what do you think could possibly happen to unify the groupings there in KZN?
Well, I mean, ultimately you must actually talk about people's interest. It's not enough to talk about that ideologically you're on the same page. They are. What you have is also access to power, and it's access to resources. So the battle is around that. But also, there are also...
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that, because even Lindiwe Zulu was saying that she cannot reconcile some of this physical contestation where people fight each other, and it's really about perhaps policy. It must be about resources somewhere.
Yeah, you must also understand that for some people, being in government, it's also a job. You see, when you look at a party like the DA, if you look at most of the members of the DA, most of them are professionals. So when a person loses a seat to represent their party, they go back to their professions. They are lawyers, they are chartered accountants and all that. But and unfortunately with the ANC, what we have are mainly activists. People who, some of them have never held any job other than a political job.
Yes.
So if you remove them there, they may not even have the necessary qualification to compete outside. But even so, even if they may have that, they are also going to be tainted because they were part of the ruling party, and people might not even want to support their own appointment. So there are these realities. But it's part of a country that is still in its embryonic stage of democracy, where now, if you listen to members of the ANC, and even the president, that's why he's passionate about education, so that members, even when they are not elected, they should not think that that's the end of the world. There should be possibilities where they can
upskill themselves.
Exactly.
That would actually probably resolve some of these issues, because as you say, it could probably be somebody fighting for their livelihood.
Yeah, exactly, because some of them, they know that if I'm not in the council, and you see this also manifesting itself, not only the divisions at the top, but even up to the level of municipalities. Because once a person is a member of council and he knows that, or she knows that at least I'll have something on the table. So it is the notion of gainful employment. But others is simply they are power hungry and also greedy for the resources that come with that power. But also politicians, they like power and they like influence. So there is that reality that if you are not in, you are more in the political wilderness.
No, this is very disturbing. But then on to the Free State. Similar problems, court battles looming there. What happens in the Free State? We know that the chairperson, Esma Khashule, has a tough competitor in Thabo Manyoni, because he's also mobilizing his people. They are trying something. So what can we expect in the Free State right now, and the implications on the National Elective Conference?
Well, first of all, I don't think Thabo Manyoni stands a chance. I mean, Esma Khashule has been in that position for a very long time.
Okay.
And when you are in a position for a long time, you have the advantage of incumbency. But not only that, you also have people who you have worked with who are in key positions. So to turn that around, it's not going to be an overnight thing. So, and when I listen to the leagues, you see the level of consolidation. Actually, Ace is a master player. He defeated even Monsieur Lukota and many people who were presented as potential competitors as far back as when Thabo Mbeki was there. So if you have a person like that who could defeat, even when he was not even in public office, when he was simply running the province at the political level, now he's running it at the political level, but also he's in public office. He has the resources, he has the platform, he has the experience of fighting, and I think I don't think Manyoni, in as much as he is also a political seasoned fellow, that he stands a chance of defeating Esma Khashule.
Could we see, though, them perhaps getting that provincial task team as well?
No, I think what the ANC needs to do is to step back, because my biggest concern right now is that these folks have lost a sense that they are comrades. The ANC's biggest problems is not internal, it's external. So actually it's not external, but it's internal. Until they resolve their internal issues, until they remind themselves that they have a historic mission, until they rediscover their comradeship, you are going to continue to have these problems. But part of it for me has been the level of ill discipline that started in 2007.
No, it's an interesting conversation this afternoon. Well, joining us from Bloemfontein is AN7 reporter Giovanni Machani, where the Free State ANC is also grappling with possible court battles. Giovanni, welcome to you. Now, take us through some of the issues in the Free State right now. We know of the letter that was sent last week by legal representatives. Now, beyond that, what has been the conversation amongst perhaps the top leadership in Free State?
No, definitely so. Good afternoon to you, Mfundo, and good afternoon to the viewers. We do know that last week, Monday, that the PEC, under the leadership of now Dr. Esma Khashule, decided that they stand behind Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma towards the presidential race of the ANC December National Elective Conference. They also stated that they are ready as a province to hold the provincial conference in November. This despite the call from NEC member SG Gwedemantashe stating that should no conferences happen beyond the 30th of September. So a lot has happened. We've heard from the Youth League as well in celebrating their 73rd anniversary, saying that they still acknowledge and respect the leadership that is still held by the Free State PEC, knowing that unfortunately Dr. Esma Khashule had to leave the province and the country to acknowledge his honorary doctorate in terms of obviously his successes in Turkey, and they've moved on on to Russia, where they are continuing to answer the call of this radical economic transformation, the need for skills development, and they are giving that opportunity to the youth, to the pupils, and that's why they are overseas. So we've heard from the provincial house, which is the Lutuli House of the Free State, named Kaiser Sebutelo House, that they will obviously respond to us in that cause once the chair and the premier of the Free State has come back. He will give us an address on the way forward from them in terms of the legal standings and obviously the way forward from the standings of the leadership of the PEC.
No, thank you very much, Giovanni, who's out in the Free State talking to us about some of the political dynamics there. Now in studio, we're joined by constitutional law expert, Dr. Diale Ndima. Doctor, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, Doctor, perhaps to start with you on this new normal of internal processes being concluded or challenged in court. What do you make of this that has become a norm in the ANC where the internal processes find themselves playing out in court?
Court challenges are normal when there are decisions taken which are not unpleasant decisions are taken. What is not so normal is when it is happening within the same organization. It shows that there is actually something wrong inside there, because this is a political organization which has got internal processes which should actually be used rather than the courts, because the politicians are the ones who normally will say courts are interfering, courts are taking over the work of the politicians. Court decisions are being the ones that overrule political decisions.
But then beyond this, if you could take us through the application itself, because some were confused. It seems all of us now are legal experts in our own little corners, but many were confused that if you're interdicting, do you interdict after an event has concluded, or you interdict while it is still in session?
It depends on when the problem leading to the need for an interdict happened. Normally, if something was anticipated, an interdict is something that you do before the actual happening of the... Once you anticipate that there will be an unpleasant decision taken, then you preempt by an interdict. But you can always do it at any time so that the effect of it should not take place.
No, panel, thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I wish I could still have you for a bit longer, but thank you very much. And that's where we end today's show. Until tomorrow.